Nestled in the heart of Idaho, Moscow represents a perfect mix of lively student culture and a tightly knit community. Known for its student-friendly vibe, the city flourishes around the esteemed University of Idaho, creating a setting where academic pursuits blend seamlessly with an energetic collegiate lifestyle. The area surrounding the university is alive with students living in dorms, rented university housing, and homes just outside campus limits. Despite Moscow's academic reputation, there were occasional discreet gatherings where students met with friends and loved ones. However, these get-togethers were usually quite ordinary. On the chilly night of November 13, 2022, university students faced a terrifying incident while relaxing after a party, shattering the calm atmosphere they had expected. This occurred in a 3-story house. The narrative begins with 4 students enrolled at the University of Idaho. 20-year-old Ethan Chapin from Conway, Washington. 21-year-old Kaylee Goncalves from Rathdrum, Idaho. 20-year-old Xana Kernadle from Post Falls, Idaho. And 21-year-old Madison Mogan from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Ethan was a freshman while Xana was a junior. Kaylee and Madison were both seniors at the university. Ethan James Chapin, the oldest of triplets, was born at 4:43 p.m. on a beautiful Tuesday, October 29, 2002, at Swedish Hospital in Seattle. Maisie followed just a minute later at 4:44, with Hunter arriving at 4:45. Initially residing in Olympia at Summit Lake, the family spent the initial year and a half there before relocating to Conway. The children attended Conway School, receiving excellent education while actively participating in soccer, basketball, and cross-country. Ethan cherished fond moments of playing basketball alongside his brother at Conway, adorned in their team jerseys. Subsequently, Ethan enrolled at Mount Vernon High School, yet his on-campus schooling or normal schooling was disrupted by the onset of the COVID pandemic. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Okay, let's continue. Alongside his siblings, Ethan transitioned to Idaho, working at Hills Resort before attempting to resume studies at MVHS, which remained affected. They later worked at Tulip Town during the tulip season before returning to Hills Resort in Idaho for summer employment, just before commencing their stint at the University of Idaho. In August 2021, Ethan's family embarked on a journey to the University of Idaho to drop off their 3 children to college. Both Ethan and Hunter joined the fraternity Sigma Chi, while Maisie became part of the Kappa Alpha Theta sorority. Since beginning his studies at the University of Idaho, Ethan embraced a vibrant social life, engaged in intramural sports, and managed his academic responsibilities. He continued his passion for sports and also developed a romantic relationship with Xana Kernadle during this time. Xana Alexia Kernadle was born on July 5, 2002 at Kootenai Health Hospital in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and grew up in Post Falls. Her early years were marked by her talent as a gymnast, showcasing her skills from a young age. Throughout her schooling at Post Falls Middle and High School, Xana actively participated in volleyball, track, and soccer until her graduation in 2020. Alongside her studies, she also worked at Texas Roadhouse. Upon enrolling at the University of Idaho, Xana pursued a major in marketing while immersing herself in extracurricular activities, notably as an engaged member of the Pi Beta Phi sorority and the Vandal Solutions sales team. Juggling these commitments, she also held a part-time position at the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow, Idaho. Beyond her academic and professional pursuits, Xana found joy in her dog, Shoeshine, cherished moments at EDM concerts, is spending quality time with friends, and eagerly embarked on family trips with her sister and father. Her childhood was filled with fond memories of her grandparents' farm and summers spent by the river. Xana's vibrant personality made her deeply loved by her family, friends, and classmates. Known for her positive and outgoing nature, she had a special ability to make everyone feel included. Her zest for life, infectious humor, and unwavering enthusiasm made an indelible mark on all who had the privilege of knowing her. Now Xana's co-occupant during her time at the University of Idaho, Madison Mae Mogan, was born on May 25, 2001 in Eugene, Oregon. She brought immense joy to her family and all around her from the very beginning. After spending her initial 2 years in Oregon, Madison's family relocated to the North Idaho region where her parents had their roots. Her upbringing in Idaho was nothing short of wonderful. Beginning her education at Winton Elementary, she later transitioned to Coeur d'Alene Charter Academy before ultimately choosing to enroll in LCHS, a decision she made after articulating her reasons in a decisive letter alongside her lifelong friend, who was practically her sister, Kaylee. It was evident to everyone who knew her that Maddie's endearing personality made her feel immensely loved. Her unique, offbeat, and humorous approach brought smile and laughter to others, and it was a well-known fact that keeping her well-fed was essential. Maddie was respected for her determination and commitment to her future endeavors. Excelling in academics and every job she undertook during high school and college, she built a network of friends, colleagues, supervisors, and teachers who admired her work ethic, care, and dedication. Excited about her academic pursuit at the University of Idaho, though a little farther from home, Maddie thrived, consistently earning a spot on the dean's list each semester. Joining Pi Beta Phi, she formed enduring bonds with close friends and also cherished having Kaylee alongside. Additionally, she found love with a boy named Jake, who held a special place in her heart. Now Maddie's best friend, Kaylee Jade Gonzalez, was born in Concord, California on June 8, 2001. Even before her arrival, she was a radiant spark for her parents, Steve and Christy Gonzalez. As the third child, Kaylee brought a unique energy with her, born with distinctive black thick curls, a charming button nose, and a perfectly round porcelain face adorned with a mysterious tiny scar on her forehead. Teased by her siblings about her horns, she remained a spirited and cherished middle child among her 5 siblings. Around the age of 1, Kaylee and her family relocated to North Idaho, where her vibrant personality flourished. Growing into a beautiful, authentic, and social individual, she adored Claire's fashion accessories and had an innate talent for eliciting laughter from those around her. Her educational journey began at Bora Elementary, alongside her older brother and sister, before transitioning to Charter Academy for middle school, where she crossed paths with Maddie Moglin, making the start of an inseparable bond. From that day forward, their lives intertwined, transforming their family of 5 into a family of 6. Despite initial hesitations from her parents, Kaylee attended Lake City High School before venturing out to the University of Idaho alongside Maddie. Joining the Alpha Phi sorority, she pursued her aspirations of becoming an elementary school teacher. Throughout her academic years, Kaylee demonstrated remarkable scholastic achievements, complemented by her ability to effortlessly make friends wherever she went. Her social, quirky, and infectious personality often infused a sense of humor and a hint of mischief into her interaction. Enthusiastic about adventure and pranks, she balanced her studies with a full-time job, showcasing her diligent work ethic. During their tenure at the University of Idaho, Madison and Xana resided together in a rental home located in close proximity to the university campus. Kaylee had previously been a resident of the same house, but had recently moved out. However, on the evening of November 12, 2022, Kaylee returned to the residence to attend a nearby party. Earlier on the evening of November 12th, 2 of the 4 students, Ethan and Xana, were present at an on-campus gathering organized by the nearby Sigma Chi fraternity, which lasted from 8 to 9 p.m. Subsequently, they arrived back home, which was the rented house, at 1:45 a.m. Meanwhile, the remaining 2 individuals, close friends, Maddie and Kayla, had spent their evening at the Corner Club, a downtown sports bar, arriving at 10 p.m. and departing around 1:30 a.m. By 1:56 a.m., all 4 individuals had indeed returned to the shared rental house. Moreover, the building accommodated 2 additional students who resided on the ground floor, sharing the space with them. All of them retired to bed for the night. One of the residents, Dylan Mortensen, stayed on the ground floor. Maddie and Kaylee shared a bed, while the other residents stayed on the same floor, but in a separate room adjacent to theirs, and Xana and Ethan shared Xana's bed. During the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, one of the residents, apart from the aforementioned, who was asleep on Maddie and Kaylee's floor, was awakened by sounds resembling Zana and her dog. She even sensed hearing Zana saying, "There's someone here." Meanwhile, Dylan on the ground floor, upon hearing unusual sounds, opened her room door twice to investigate. During the second instance, she discerned what appeared to be cries emanating from Zana's room, accompanied by a male voice reassuring, "It's okay. I'm going to help you." Curiosity compelled her to open the door a third time, revealing a figure draped in black attire and a mask covering their mouth and nose, advancing in her direction. The unfamiliar individual, unnoticed by Dylan, proceeded past her and utilized the sliding glass door to depart. Stricken by a state of shock, she stood frozen momentarily, eventually seeking safety by locking herself within her room. No calls to 911 were immediately made. However, at 11:58 a.m. on November 13, 2022, hours following the incident, a call was finally placed from within the residence, utilizing a roommate's cell, requesting aid for an unconscious individual. Upon police arrival, they discovered the home's door open with no signs of forced entry or internal damage. Nothing seemed to be missing from the premises. Both the roommates were inside when the authorities arrived. However, the police made a grisly and distressing discovery. The heartbreaking truth unfolded. Zana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee had been fatally stabbed while in their respective beds on the second and third floors of the home. The victims were found without restraints or gags, and blood spatters stained the walls at the scene. Maddie and Kaylee were located in Maddie's bedroom, while Zana and Ethan were discovered in Zana's room. However, the lingering question remained. Why did the killer spare the lives of the two roommates? Homicide detective Phil Waters speculated that the assailant may not have noticed Dylan or the other girl in the darkness. However, this assumption cannot be unequivocally regarded as the absolute truth. At present, it's the closest explanation available, pending further investigation and evidence. The surviving roommates had summoned friends to the home as they were concerned about one of the victims on the second floor, believing her to be unconscious and unresponsive. Though the identity of the 911 caller was withheld, the police verified that the caller was not regarded as a suspect in the tragic incident. During the investigation, the police uncovered a live-streamed video on Twitch by the Grub Truck, a food truck located 4 blocks south at Friendship Square. The footage depicted Maddie and Kaylee at 1:41 a.m. engaged in conversation and displaying smiles. 10 minutes later, they acquired their food and departed, initially presumed to have taken an Uber ride home, covering the distance of approximately 1 mile. 7 unsuccessful phone calls were registered from Kaylee's phone to her ex-boyfriend, a fellow student, between 2:26 and 2:52 a.m. Additionally, Maddie attempted to contact Kaylee's former boyfriend 3 times during a similar time frame, from 2:44 to 2:52 a.m., all resulting in unanswered calls. These calls underwent investigation, with police ultimately concluding that they did not consider the recipient of those missed calls to be involved in the crime. Following a forensic examination of Zana's cell phone, records indicated her activity on the TikTok app at 4:12 a.m. Additionally, security cameras positioned near the residence captured audio recordings of whimpering, a notable loud thud, and repeated barking from a dog, commencing approximately at 4:17 a.m. Detectives deduced that the tragic killings took place within a window of time estimated to be between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. On the evening following the tragic events of November 13th, the university made the decision to cancel classes for November 14th. Furthermore, they arranged a candlelight vigil initially planned to be held on the UI administration building lawn for the evening of November 16th, which was subsequently postponed for 2 weeks. Initially, investigators stated that there appeared to be no immediate risk to the community following the day of the killings. However, 3 days later, Moscow Police Chief James Fry revised the assessment stating, "We cannot definitively assert that there's no threat to the community." Fall break had been planned to commence after November 18th, with classes set to resume on November 28th. However, in response to the initial assurances provided by the police being met with skepticism and concern from many residents and other Moscow residents regarding their safety, an early Thanksgiving holiday exodus from the area began. Some individuals who chose to remain were understandably anxious and exercised caution, leading several professors to cancel their classes during this period. The fathers of Kaylee Gonzalez and Ethan Chapin expressed criticism concerning the restricted information flow from both the police and the university to the families of the victims. Additionally, a wave of speculation and misinformation about the case emerged on social media, propagated by individuals on platforms like TikTok, self-identified psychics, and various other social media users. In response to this escalating situation, the Moscow Police Department rebuked internet sleuths for their involvement in generating widespread online rumors and disrupting the ongoing investigations. In a news release issued on December 2nd, they highlighted the speculative nature of the information circulating without factual substantiation, which was fueling community anxieties and disseminating falsehoods. The Latah County coroner conducted autopsies on the 4 victims on November 17, 2022, revealing that all had sustained multiple stab wounds, particularly fatal ones inflicted on the chest and upper body. The nature of the wounds indicated that a large knife or very similar ones had been used in the attacks. Additionally, at least one victim displayed defensive wounds on their hands, suggesting attempts to fend off the assailant, with the possibility that others also made similar efforts. Disturbingly, the victims may have been attacked while they were asleep in their beds. However, no evidence suggested any form of assault in the tragic deaths. The coroner unequivocally declared all 4 deaths as homicides resulting from stabbing, yet none of the victims were found tied or gagged. Despite thorough investigations, no weapon has been recovered. Authorities suspect that the perpetrator or perpetrators employed a fixed-blade knife in the commission of the crime. The surviving roommate who had cited the suspect provided a description, portraying the individual as an unfamiliar male, approximately 5 foot 10 inches tall. The roommate noted that the suspect was not notably muscular, but possessed an athletically built physique, further emphasizing distinctively bushy eyebrows as a notable feature of the individual's appearance. On November 19, 2022, law enforcement authorities appealed to the public for any video footage captured at the residence on the night of the tragic incident. To facilitate the collection of potential evidence, a phone tip line and email address were established, encouraging students and other individuals to submit any relevant information to the authorities. During a press conference held on November 23, 2022, the Moscow police chief disclosed that authorities had received several tips, one of which suggested that Kaylee might have had a stalker. However, at that point, law enforcement officials were unable to substantiate or confirm the reliability of that claim, nor were they able to identify any individual fitting the description of the potential stalker. By December 5, 2022, the response from the public was substantial, with more than 26,100 tips submitted via duct email, approximately 27,100 phone calls received, an additional 1,000 digital media submissions through these designated tip lines. Subsequently, on December 24, 2022, the investigative team disclosed that they had amassed a staggering count of at least 15,000 tips pertaining to the case from various sources and members of the public. Initially, the police did not rule out the possibility of there being more than one perpetrator involved in the tragic incident. Authorities expressed their belief that the attack was potentially targeted. However, they had yet to determine definitively whether the target was the residence itself or its occupants. After receiving numerous tips from the public, on December 15, 2022, the police announced their intention to scrutinize records involving approximately 22,000 fifth-generation Hyundai Elantras manufactured between 2011 and 2013. Surveillance footage from the area had captured video evidence of an Elantra present around the time of the tragic incident. Investigators observed that this vehicle had made multiple passes along the same route in close proximity to the residence. Another surveillance recording, acquired by investigators, depicted Elantra passing by the victim's home 3 times, commencing around 3:29 a.m. Subsequently, at 4:04 a.m., the Elantra returned to the residence for a 4th time. Notably, at 4:20 a.m., the same car was observed speeding away from the victim's neighborhood. Some days later, the investigators finally tracked the ownership of the Elantra vehicle to a local resident, Brian Kaberger, who had driven it along with his father to the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania for the holiday season. He and his father were pulled over by the police for tailgating. During their journey, Brian Kohberger was pulled over again by the Indiana State Police on Interstate 70 outside Greenfield, Indiana, for infractions of speeding and tailgating. However, the FBI refuted allegations that they had directed the Indiana State Police to conduct these stops. Subsequently, when investigators dug deeper into Kohberger's whereabouts, they acquired cell phone data indicating Kohberger's phone had ceased connecting to the network around 2:47 a.m. in Pullman on November 13, 2022, before reconnecting at approximately 4:48 a.m. near Blaine, Idaho, an area near U.S. Highway 95 south of Moscow. Further cell phone data revealed that Kohberger's phone accessed a cell tower in close proximity to the victim's residence at around 9 a.m. on November 13, 2022. Roughly 5 hours after the tragic incident occurred. Moreover, police obtained data indicating that his phone had pinged from the cell phone tower nearest to the residence at least 12 times between June 2022 and November 13, 2022. However, this was not all. In addition to this evidence, investigators collected a DNA sample from the crime scene that did not match the DNA of any of the victims. This DNA was discovered on a tan leather knife sheath found on Maddie's bed. Authorities utilized a public genealogy database, which led them to a partial match with an individual having a familial connection to Kohberger. Subsequently, investigators pursued this lead and successfully traced the DNA evidence to Kohberger by matching it with DNA retrieved from the trash collected at his family's residence in Pennsylvania. Investigators proceeded to surveil Kohberger outside his parents' residence in Pennsylvania. During surveillance, Kohberger was observed on multiple occasions wearing surgical gloves and placing trash bags into a neighbor's garbage can. Subsequently, the items retrieved from the trash were sent to the Idaho State Lab for further testing as part of the investigation. Authorities also noted that Kohberger had meticulously cleaned his vehicle, thoroughly addressing both the interior and exterior, ensuring that no area was overlooked or left uncleaned. On December 30, 2022, 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohberger was apprehended, unveiling comprehensive details about his background and personal information. Brian Christopher Kohberger was born on November 21, 1994, hailed from Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Raised in Pennsylvania with his parents, Michael and Mary, and two sisters, Amanda and Melissa, Kohberger's online presence was limited until his arrest. His academic pursuits primarily focused on criminality and psychology, aligning with his family's inclination towards education, especially in psychology-related fields. He graduated from Pleasant Valley High School in 2013 and attended Monroe Career and Technical Institute in Bartonsville, but dropped out a year later. Kohberger pursued an associate degree in psychology at Northampton Community College in Bethlehem, which he obtained in 2018. After his graduation, he secured a position as a security guard within the Pleasant Valley School District, where his father had previously held a maintenance role for an extended period, and his mother had served as a substitute teacher for a while. While at work, Kohberger's proactive response during a colleague's medical emergency garnered local attention in Pennsylvania. However, before this, his high school years were marked by weight-related bullying. Kohberger underwent a significant weight loss, transforming his appearance and purportedly impacting his demeanor. Friends noted a noticeable shift in his behavior post-weight loss, describing instances of bullying and manipulation within his social circle. Several acquaintances asserted that Kohberger battled drug abuse, allegedly starting with marijuana to cope with teenage harassment and escalating to a heroin addiction. He reportedly sought rehabilitation after high school, continuing his education with an associate's degree and later pursuing higher studies at DeSales University in Center City, Pennsylvania, where he excelled academically in psychology and criminology. And finally, in 2022, he received his master's degree in criminal justice. Kohberger ventured to Washington State University for a PhD program in Pullman, Washington, aiming to achieve a career in law enforcement. However, during this time, he encountered disciplinary issues in his teaching assistant role due to behavioral problems and problematic attitudes toward women. Email correspondence between Kohberger and Professor John Snyder revealed repeated warnings about his professionalism and conduct. Ultimately, on December 19, 2022, A month after the tragic murders, Kohberger was terminated from his teaching position at WSU. On December 30, 2022, Brian Kohberger was apprehended at his parents' residence in Monroe County, Pennsylvania by an FBI SWAT team and Pennsylvania State Police. During the arrest, officials discovered Kohberger in the kitchen, attired in a shirt and shorts, donning examination gloves, and sorting trash into individual Ziploc baggies. He faced charges of 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 felony count of burglary upon his arrest. Assigned a public defender, he remained incarcerated without bond at the Monroe County Correctional Facility in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Kohberger's legal representatives asserted his innocence and his determination to establish his clean hands. His family issued a statement extending sympathies to the victims and emphasized the importance of presuming their son's purity. Individuals within Kohberger's social circle were stunned by the accusations against him, although some from his past were less surprised by the allegations. Kohberger then consented to extradition during his initial appearance at the county courthouse on January 3, 2023. Subsequently, on January 4th, he was transported by flight to Pullman and then driven to the Lataka County Jail in Moscow, where he was detained without bail. A week later, on January 12, 2023, he appeared for a status conference in the same courtroom at the courthouse. On May 17, 2023, the Lataka County District Court disclosed that Kohberger had been formally charged by a grand jury with 5 offenses, 4 counts of first-degree murder, and 1 count of felony burglary. The scheduled preliminary hearing set for June 26 was annulled following the indictment. On Monday, May 22, 2023, in Lataka County District Court, Kohberger declined to enter a plea. As just seen, the judge, in response to this unconventional stance, proceeded to enter a not guilty plea on behalf of Kohberger, paving the way for a trial where he could potentially face the death penalty. On June 26, 2023, the Latter County Prosecutor's Office declared its intent to pursue the death penalty due to the statutory aggravating circumstances associated with the first-degree murder charges against Kohberger. He remains detained at the Latter County Jail without bond, maintaining a plea of not guilty to all charges. The judge scheduled Kohberger's trial for October 2, 2023, accommodating requests from both Kohberger's attorney and the state. As of now, no further updates have been disclosed to the public regarding the case. However, it's speculated that prosecutors have requested to schedule Kohberger's trial for the summer of 2024. As for the question regarding Kohberger's motive for committing this heinous act, the answer remains elusive. Law enforcement authorities believe that the intended target of his attack was either Madison or Kaylee. Nevertheless, no substantial clues or evidence have been discovered thus far to confirm this statement, keeping the case still a mystery waiting to be unraveled. In 1980, 22-year-old Dale Nancy Wyman resided on Washington Avenue in what was then known as Vanier, Ontario. She had confided in some family members about her desire to leave home due to her father's abusive behavior, but they didn't expect her to depart without informing anyone of her plans. However, on July 16, 1980, she did just that. Around 11:45 that morning, she left her home with a suitcase and took a cab to a bus station on Catherine Street. She didn't disclose her destination, and her family never heard from her again. In the investigation into her disappearance, police interviewed the main witness, the taxi driver who had picked Dale up and taken her to the bus station. He told them that Dale had mentioned that she was not sure where she was traveling to, but she was considering Toronto or Montreal. He also said that when he went inside the bus terminal, after dropping Dale off to get a cup of coffee, he had seen Dale talking with 2 other young adults who have never been identified. Tips called into police placed Dale in Alberta in 1991 and Toronto in 1992, but the sightings were never substantiated. Dale's family received a phone call from a hospital in Saskatoon trying to locate the family of an individual in their care, but this did not lead them to Dale. This call did lead to retired RCMP officer Linda Davidson, who is now the director of an organization called Murdered Unidentified Cold Case Investigations, investigating hospital records and unidentified remains from this area, when she began working on the case as a private investigator decades later. In May of 2021, in honor of Dale's 63rd birthday, there was a new appeal to the public for information about the case. Police in Ottawa released a new age-progressed sketch of what Dale might look like, along with a video message recorded by Dale's sister, Brenda Larchie. In it, Brenda stated, "Dale is deeply missed by her brother and 2 sisters. Our hearts hold an empty space for her, and we pray and hope that someone may remember her in any way. Please help us to resolve this and find some peace and closure. Thank you, and God bless for any tips brought forward." Brenda also spoke directly to her sister in case she saw the message, saying that she loved her and wishing her a happy birthday. It would be this effort that would ultimately lead to the resolution of Dale's case. On August 10, 2022, Ottawa police announced that a third party had eventually seen the age-progressed image of Dale and called to report that Dale had been living outside of Canada and had recently passed away. Ottawa Police's Missing Persons Unit followed up on the tip and was able to confirm the information. At the time, authorities did not release any further information about what had become of Dale. However, it was later disclosed that the third party who had called in was Dale's daughter. Dale had made a life for herself in Ohio, where she had a family. She passed away just 2 months before her daughter saw the age-progressed image and learned that she was a missing person whose family had never given up the search for her. Dale's siblings are struggling to accept this new information, as well as the fact that Dale passed away just before they found her. Dale's daughter has been put in contact with her family in Canada. In May of 1990, 35-year-old Myrtle Brown needed some time away, so she traveled to New York City to visit her best friend. However, the trip proved to be anything but relaxing. While in the city, someone stole her purse, which held all of her money, her identification, and medication she used to treat her epilepsy. Myrtle called her mother back home to tell her about the robbery. She also mentioned that she was not feeling well and that she would have to find a hospital where she could obtain an emergency refill on her prescription. Myrtle's family never heard from her again. They reported her missing and went to New York, where they spent weeks visiting hospitals and police stations looking for her with no success. They had to return home without answers, and decades would pass with no information about what became of Myrtle. Myrtle's daughter Ebony, who was just 13 years old when her mother went missing, struggled with going through the milestones in her life without her mother, especially because she did not know for sure if her mother was absent from her life voluntarily or not. Myrtle's family would not receive any new information about her case for more than 30 years. In April of 2022, the month before the 32nd anniversary of Myrtle's disappearance, Myrtle's brother Robert was watching NBC's Nightly News with Lester Holt. The show aired a segment about a cold case squad working out of the New York City office of the chief medical examiner to determine the identities of more than 1,200 unidentified sets of remains located in New York City over the course of the past several decades. During the segment, Robert saw one facial reconstruction that he believed looked like his sister. He decided to contact the unit to see if they could help him determine if the woman depicted in the reconstruction could be Myrtle. Dr. Angela Soler, the assistant director of forensic anthropology, and her team began looking into Myrtle's case. The woman in the reconstruction that initially inspired Robert to call was proven not to be Myrtle, but Dr. Soler and her team continued researching to see if Myrtle was in fact one of the unidentified individuals in their caseload. Using Myrtle's physical details and the timing of her disappearance, the team was able to identify a potential match after more than 2 months of work. Dr. Soler notified Robert and Ebony about the potential match over a phone call. To see if they were correct, the team had to send them a photograph of an unidentified individual taken after they had passed away. When Ebony and Robert saw the photograph, they were able to confirm that the woman was Myrtle. 32 years after Myrtle went missing, her family finally learned the details of what had happened to her. Myrtle had suffered a seizure while waiting in the emergency room at Kings County Hospital and passed away. However, she died during a brief period of bureaucratic limbo that prevented her from being quickly identified and her family from being notified of her death. She had not yet registered with or been admitted to the hospital, so when her family searched for her, there was not a record of her being a patient there. Since her purse had been stolen, she had no identification with her when she died. Internal records do show that she did provide her name and date of birth to the hospital when she arrived to the emergency room, which helped the cold case unit identify her more than 30 years later. The Brown family was able to hold a virtual memorial for Myrtle after she was identified. They say that they now have peace knowing what happened to Myrtle. Before we continue, 90% of you haven't subscribed to our channel, so if you like this video, please subscribe. It motivates us to make more content for you. Okay, let's continue. Paul McGinty was from Mount Charles in County Donegal, Ireland. He was one of 9 children. Like many Irish men, he moved to England for work in the 1960s. He lived for a time in London before moving to Coventry and supporting himself by working on building sites. Paul, then aged 51, was going through a difficult time in 1991 as he was out of work. He was able to pay the rent he owed before he suddenly went missing on April 8th, leaving all of his belongings behind. Paul's friends had tried to get local authorities to investigate his disappearance, but police did not take an interest in the case. While he no longer lived near them, Paul had still been in contact with his family back in Ireland. His sister, Eileen, saw him in person for the last time in 1987 when he came home to attend their brother's funeral. They would call each other for Christmas and Easter and a few times in between each year. When she called the home where he had been staying one day in 1991, his landlord informed her that Paul had gone missing. Eileen would be the only one of Paul's siblings to live long enough to see his disappearance solved more than 30 years later. On April 18, 1991, a man's body was found in Bracetown, County Meath. Foul play was not suspected in his death, but the man had no identification on him, and since his identity was unknown, his next of kin could not be notified of his death. The man had been seen around the county in the week previous, talking with locals at a pub and attending a Gaelic Athletic Association match, but no one who had seen or interacted with him knew his name. He had looked disheveled and had been living as a transient once he arrived in the area. The man's body was photographed, as were his belongings, including the gray herringbone coat he had been found wearing and the St. Christopher medal he carried with him. 7 months of investigation did not uncover the man's identity. He was then buried in a grave marked only by a small stone in St. Mary's Cemetery in Navan. A renewed effort to learn the unidentified man's identity began in 2021. His remains were exhumed in hopes of collecting a DNA sample, but things did not go according to plan. Forensic Science Ireland ultimately concluded that a usable DNA sample could not be collected, which can sometimes happen based on circumstances during the exhumation or the extent or nature. Investigators then turned to the other evidence they had in an effort to solve the case. The man's body had been discovered within a day or two of his death, meaning it had not yet decomposed very much. So the photographs investigators took of his body at the time it was found gave a good idea of what the man had looked like in life. Because the photographs were such high quality, they were sent to a forensic artist who drew an image of what the man would have looked like before his death. This image was subsequently shown on the RTE television program Crime Call in hopes that someone would recognize him. A man named Michael Leonard happened to be watching the program the night it aired in his home in County Donegal. He nearly fell out of his chair when he saw the artist rendering on the screen, as he immediately recognized it as Paul McGinty. Michael had met Paul decades earlier when Paul and Michael's brother, John, worked together in Coventry. John had seen Paul just the day before he appeared. Other members of the Leonard family had met Paul as well, and they had all never forgotten him, wondering what had become of him in the decades after he disappeared. When Michael told the other members of his family about the composite image, they all also recognized it as Paul upon seeing it. Michael then went to see Paul's sister Eileen to show her the image, and she too immediately recognized it as her brother. She went to the authorities to begin the process of confirming the identification. In November of 2022, a coroner's inquest was held in Mead Coroner's Court outlining the details of the case and formally identifying the previously unidentified man found in April of 1991 as Paul McGinty. It is unknown what brought Paul to County Meath, as he had no known ties there. His lone surviving sibling, his sister Eileen, who is now in her 80s, was able to attend the inquest and see her brother's case officially solved after more than 3 decades. In 1993, 36-year-old Suzanne Pole lived with her husband of 9 years, Daryl, and their 2 children, 8-year-old Melissa and 6-year-old Adam. The couple enjoyed a happy marriage, and Suzanne was cherished by her extended family. She worked night shifts at the Sands and McDougall Stationery Shop on John Street in Salisbury, located north of Adelaide, South Australia. On the night of April 29, 1993, Suzanne did not come home at her usual hour. Her husband, Daryl, made several attempts to call the store, but his wife never picked up the phone. He therefore decided to drive down to the store to check on her. When he arrived, he saw that his wife's car was still in the parking lot. The lights were still on in the store, and the door was still unlocked when he tried it. He cheerfully sang out his wife's name as he walked inside. He did not receive a response. When he reached the counter, he finally realized that something terrible had happened. The back storage door was open and he could see his wife's legs on the floor. He also saw a large quantity of Suzanne was lying on her back, with her purse, which appeared to have been gone through, next to her. When Daryl got to his wife, he checked for a pulse and noticed that her hands had been badly cut. He tried performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on her, but had to remove a rolled-up piece of paper from her mouth before he could do so. Suzanne had suffered extensive stab wounds in what would later be described by authorities as a ferocious attack. Many of the stab wounds were inflicted to her back as she tried to escape her killer. Authorities believed Suzanne's killer entered the store around 9 p.m. while she was counting the money from the register to close down for the night. Robbery appeared to be the motive for the murder, as approximately $300 was missing from the store. The $200 Suzanne had taken out from the bank earlier that day to pay for some mechanical repairs was also missing from her purse. Because she always worked the closing shift at the store and service stations in the area were often robbed. Suzanne and her husband had discussed what she would do in the event of a robbery in the past. She had always stated that she would hand over the money to a robber without hesitation because she would not risk her life for the cash. Despite an extensive police investigation, Suzanne's case went cold. It would be more than 26 years before an arrest was made in the case. On September 20, 2019, 46-year-old Matthew Donald Tilley was arrested in Ballarat, Victoria in connection to Suzanne's murder. He was subsequently extradited to South Australia to face murder charge. He pled not guilty. Following Tilley's arrest, Suzanne's daughter Melissa released a statement thanking the police and expressing some of the complex emotions the arrest had brought on for her and her family. It would be Tilley's own blood and one of his blood relatives that ultimately identified him as Suzanne's killer. In addition to the large amount of Suzanne's blood found at the scene, blood from an unknown male was also found on her handbag and in 3 locations around the entrance to the store. A DNA profile from the blood was identified by 1999, but there was no match to it in the national database. Eventually, however, authorities discovered a familial match to the DNA profile in the database. While they still did not have a direct match to the DNA from the crime scene, they did find a partial match, meaning the individual they found in the database was related to the person who left their blood at Suzanne's crime scene. The individual in the database was Daniel Tilley, the brother of Matthew Tilley. Investigators began looking at all the members of Daniel's family, which ultimately led them to investigate Matthew Tilley. They traveled to Victoria to meet with him and spoke to him outside. When Matthew threw out his coffee cup in a trash can along the street, they collected it and had the saliva left behind on it tested for DNA. It was a match to the DNA found at the crime scene. Another DNA sample was taken from Tilley in a more clinical setting and confirmed the match. At the time of Suzanne's murder, Tilley's mother had lived just a few streets away from the store where Suzanne was killed. He was working at a service station at the time and claimed to have been at work on the night of the murder, although by 2019, the records that would have proven or contradicted that claim were no longer available. In the years since the murder, he had moved to Victoria, gotten married, and fathered 4 sons. Tilley's 4-week trial began in November of 2021. His defense relied heavily on the possibility that the DNA from the crime scene had been contaminated at some point during the 26 years between Suzanne's murder and Tilley law enforcement not wearing gloves or foot coverings at the crime scene. She also argued that while the amount of blood that did not belong to Suzanne found at the scene was enough to fill a vial, her client had not had any cuts to his hands at the time of the murder, although how this could be proven is unclear. Witnesses had provided descriptions of men seen in the area of the stationery store on the night of the murder, but none of them had matched Tilley's description, and none of Tilly's fingerprints were found inside the store. The jury was not persuaded by these arguments, however. After 4.5 hours of deliberation, they came back with a guilty verdict. Tilly was sentenced to life in prison, with his non-parole period set at 26 years after court proceedings in March of 2022. Tilly was identified because his brother, Daniel Tilly's, DNA was in the police database and came up as a familial match to the DNA at the crime scene. Daniel Tilly has reacted violently to his brother's arrest and conviction, attacking members of the media on 3 different occasions throughout his brother's legal proceedings. The most recent incident occurred in September of 2022 when he exited court and charged at a waiting cameraman, shoving him to the ground with enough force to cut his head. Daniel Tilly continuously swore throughout the attack, which he carried out in full view of a bus full of schoolchildren and had to be contained by sheriff's officers, who subsequently denied him re-entry to the courtroom for later proceedings. Appearing in court in November of 2022 for charges stemming from this incident, as well as one that occurred in March of 2022, Daniel Tilly stated that he would be contesting the assault charges he was facing. He did state that he intended to plead guilty to a property damage charge he faced for throwing a microphone that belonged to Channel 9 News against a wall on the day his brother was sentenced. Matthew Tilly is currently appealing his conviction and wants it overturned on the grounds that the trial judge misdirected jurors and gave an unbalanced summary of the evidence at his trial. His legal team argued at his first appeal hearing that he is only tied to the crime through his DNA, which they allege calls his guilt into question. Suzanne's family has stated that they hope her case and Tilly's conviction after so many years had passed will give hope to other families of cold case victims still waiting for justice. On March 18, 2023, Angela Craig, a mother of 6 from Denver, Colorado, was pronounced brain dead at 4:29 p.m. What caused this tragic turn of events? Angela had been in good health until she suddenly fell ill with a mysterious condition that led to debilitating symptoms and ultimately caused her organs to fail, leaving doctors baffled. Just a few days earlier, on March 5th, the 43-year-old had returned home from a trip to Utah to visit her sister. On the morning of March 6th, Angela reached out to her husband, 45-year-old James Craig, reporting that she wasn't feeling well. They discussed the protein shake he had prepared for her that morning, and she inquired if he had added extra vitamins beyond her usual intake. She was experiencing dizziness and mental fog. Eventually, she went to the emergency room at Parker Adventist Hospital, but doctors couldn't determine the cause and sent her home the same day. By March 9th, her symptoms had significantly worsened. She was dizzy and having a hard time focusing. She had also started vomiting, couldn't keep medication down, had headaches, and was starting to become extremely dehydrated. She was admitted again to the Parker Adventist Hospital. She was tested for everything that they could think of. In text messages between her and her husband and her friend, they discussed how it was believed that she might have diabetes or an autoimmune disorder, but all the tests were coming back negative. In text, James wrote to Angela, quote, "Baby, I love you so much. I wish I could just stay up there for 247 and be with you. I know it's lonely and boring and maybe sometimes scary, and I just want to be there to support you through all of it." During her time in the hospital, James was constantly messaging his wife, asking how she felt if she was improving, and how much he loved and cared about her and wished her well. For days, she would not see much, if any, improvement. She would be in the hospital until March 14th, when they could not figure out what had been wrong with Angela. She was discharged and put on oxygen at home. Less than 24 hours later, Angela's brother rushed her to the Colorado University Hospital emergency room at approximately 11 a.m. Her husband, James, would arrive very soon after she was admitted. Angela complained of a severe headache and dizziness, and at approximately 2 p.m., she had a seizure and would start to decline rapidly. Doctors struggled to intubate, and she suffered intracranial pressure and no pupil response. Angela was moved to the intensive care unit, and doctors said her prognosis was very dire. Sometime after her husband arrived, his business partner and best friend arrived and pulled a nurse aside, informing her that they had suspicions that Angela may have been poisoned by her husband. He went on to explain that an employee of his had come to him that morning, reporting an odd encounter that she'd had with Dr. Craig earlier that week, right before Angela had gotten sick. She said that an odd package had been delivered to the office, and she opened it accidentally. Inside was a substance that they did not use nor had any reason to be delivered to their dental practice. The substance was labeled as potassium cyanide, and when Dr. Craig noticed that she'd opened the package, he said that it was a personal item and took it into his office. They hadn't thought much about it, but when Angela had gotten so sick and was still so sick, she considered the package and that it might not have been a mysterious illness after all. That was when she told the other managing partner what she'd seen. However, this realization would come too late. But who was Angela Craig? Born Angela Dawn Prey, she was born on April 15, 1979 in Dodge City, Kansas. She was part of a big family, one of 10 children, and she got out of Dodge, as her obituary said, after marrying James Craig on December 18, 1999. In the 23 years of their marriage, she had 6 children and the family had lived in Denver, Colorado. They had lived in the area for 15 years. She was described as kind, energetic, intelligent, and had a good humor, the sort of person that would show up for anything, and she had a huge ability to forgive. Both Angela and James were elders in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. James counseled youth, and Angela was the choir director and also worked as a family history consultant for their church. Angela had also confided in her sister that James had an addiction to pornography and had been caught having multiple affairs. She also revealed that James was also gambling, and he was in a considerable amount of debt. The family had already filed for bankruptcy in 2021, and they were likely going to have to file again. James was on the verge of losing their home and business. Law enforcement arrived at the hospital just after midnight on March 16th. Shortly after their arrival, they learned Angela was in a coma and that doctors were unsure if she was going to make it through the night. On March 18th at 4:29 p.m., Angela was pronounced brain dead, and James opted to pull the plug. He'd also been adamant with the hospital not to do an autopsy and wanted to quickly arrange a cremation. The investigation into her death started before she had been pronounced dead. However, James wasn't aware that there was an investigation into her death that had started long before 18th. Days after her death, James Craig was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Angela's toxicology would show that she had 3 different unusual substances in her system at the time that she died: potassium cyanide, arsenic, and tetrahydrazine, and her death was ruled a homicide. The police investigation started on March 16th. They got search warrants for the home, dental practice, and James' devices. Items seized from the Craig's residence included multiple types of protein powders, multiple workout-style shakers used to drink those protein powders, a computer tablet, 2 different unlabeled plastic bags with a white powdery substance, and a water bottle on an exercise bike. A Child Protective Services caseworker would also contact law enforcement after they'd interviewed James and his children individually. They informed law enforcement that James had made some concerning statements, focusing mainly on that he had said that Angela had severe depression and had been suicidal for some time. James had also told the caseworker that he had found Angela after attempting to take her life and had personally revived her on several occasions. He also said that he had asked his wife for a divorce in December 2022, and that her depression had got much worse after that. He informed the caseworker that she had previously overdosed on opioids and that she would likely have something in her toxicology report, but he didn't know what it would be. The caseworker felt compelled to report this to the police because none of the children reported any kind of depression from their mother or any previous suicide attempt. The children ages range from 20 to 8 years old. Certainly, the older kids would have noticed their mother having some sort of decline in mental health, but they hadn't noticed anything unusual with their mother. The caseworker ultimately believed that it would be unlikely that no one else living in the house other than James would have missed these signs or evidence of depression or suicide. They thought it was very much more likely that James was setting up a cover story. James' business partner and his wife would provide the police with statements and screenshots of their text message conversations that James had had with them. James and his business partner had gone to dental school together, and they had known each other's families for decades. They knew Angela and the kids and were deeply concerned about James's behavior while Angela had been ill. The messages include a message to his business partner expressing how mad he was that he had told authorities about the package that had been delivered to the office, that he was very unhappy that the children had to see their mom for the last time after police had gotten their evidence. He said that if he cared for them at all, he would not talk to the police unless forced. This was the message James sent to his business partner, quote, "I understand why you did what you did. I do. I get it. But if you had come to me personally, man to man, instead of talking to everyone else about what you thought you knew, I might have let you in on some details that would have made you less likely to cause this horrible storm. If you had only put me higher on your list of priorities instead of putting everyone else's opinions and gossip ahead of me. For that, I'm very, very mad at you." With the search of both James and Angela's phone, police were able to check past text message conversations between the couple on the days that led to 18th. First, they found a conversation about not telling her sister about conversations that they'd had the night before. This conversation happened on March 1st when she was visiting Utah. The conversations would also include her time not feeling well, including the first day she wasn't feeling well, and James' message, quote, "Given our history, I know that this must be triggering. For the record, I didn't drug you. I'm super worried, though. You really looked pale before I left. Like in your lips even." And while Angela had still been in the hospital, he texted this message to a friend. Quote, "If it wasn't my wife, this would be kind of a fun puzzle to try to work out." Angela's sister would later tell the police that James had drugged Angela approximately 5 to 6 years prior. She said that Angela had told her that she had been drugged with an unknown substance because James had told her he had done it so that he could go to the bathroom and give himself a lethal injection. He apparently drugged her so that she would not find him or be able to stop him before the injection took effect. Angela had apparently told her that there'd been no evidence that he'd ever tried to commit suicide, and the two didn't speak of it again. Her sister also told police that the marriage between James and Angela had always been tumultuous. James had multiple affairs over the years, and he had told his wife he'd been addicted to pornography since he was a teenager. Law enforcement would talk to the office manager from dental practice. She had worked as their office manager for about 6 months, and she told police in her interview that she'd been told that on March 6th, James and his wife had worked out together and that he had given his wife extra protein in her shake because she was feeling sluggish, and that she had started to feel unwell and had been taken to the hospital. And after his wife had been discharged the first time, she had found James in exam room 9 on a computer in there, which had been odd because he had his own computer in his office and a laptop that he often took home with him. He would not have needed to use that computer except with a patient, and he was alone. Shortly after she left the office, with James still in the exam room, she got a text message from James saying that a package was going to be delivered to the office, but it was personal and to not open it. In the following days, Angelo was back in the hospital. James had said he was unsure if his wife was quote-unquote going to make it in the same sentence, and also asked how the business was doing, which she had found odd. On March 13th, when the package arrived, the office manager discovered that one of the other office staff had opened the package, not knowing it was for James personally. The office manager went to reseal the package so she could put it in James's office when she noticed a packing slip for potassium cyanide. She had never seen it delivered to the office, and she didn't know a need they would have for it. She resealed the package and hand-delivered it to James. When Angela was back in the hospital, she looked up the side effects of cyanide poisoning, and it matched her symptoms. That was when she then informed the business partner. On March 17th, police started to look into James's web history. They discovered that on the computer hard drive found in exam room 9, James had another Gmail account, different than the one that they knew. With this email, James had conducted searches for how many grams of pure arsenic to kill a human. Is arsenic detectable in an autopsy? The same account was used to order arsenic metal from Amazon on February 27, 2023, and it was delivered to his home on March 4th. More searches were conducted, including YouTube searches for top 5 undetectable poisons that show no signs of foul play, how to make poison, the top 10 deadliest plants that can kill you. The top 5 undetectable poisons video listed both cyanide and arsenic as follows. Quote, cyanide found in countless items in the home and other locations. 1.5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight is a fatal dose for humans. Arsenic is virtually undetectable besides the Marsh test used in murder and mystery. This was not only the chemical that was ordered using this Gmail account. James had also ordered potassium cyanide from Midland Scientific. His order confirmation came through on March 9th after some emails back and forth for proper forms to be signed. In the emails, James said it was for surgery and he needed delivered the next day. The emails between Midland Scientific and James showed that he would get the package on March 13th, not the next day. This is believed to be the package that was opened by office staff. While looking into this new email, police would also find correspondence between a woman and James that seemed to be intimate in nature. 2 flight itineraries were found with this woman traveling from Austin, Texas to Denver, Colorado. The dates of these flights were March 8th to 10th and March 16th to 20th. The second itinerary was purchased on March 4th, the same day that the arsenic arrived, and they were able to learn that this woman was an orthodontist who James had met at a conference earlier in the year. She has since had an interview where she explained that when they met, she was in the final stages of a lengthy divorce, and that James had told her he was also getting a divorce. According to her, James had told her that he was already living apart from his wife. The two had lengthy conversations about the struggles they faced while ending long marriages, bonding over navigating moving forward, and other experiences that she believed they were both experiencing. The two had only just started dating, and it hadn't been a serious relationship yet, and she hadn't been rushing into anything. She has since fully cooperated with law enforcement once all of his lies came to light. She wanted to set the record straight that they had not started talking about a future together, so she didn't believe that she had been any sort of motive to murder Angela. She also said that had she known he was still married and living as his wife, she wouldn't have ever dated him. She also revealed that the two had 2 dinner dates together while his wife was on life support in the hospital. James had told her that his wife was sick in the hospital, and she said that he didn't seem stressed or anxious at that time. On their second date, James had said that Angela was dying, so she ended their date insisting that he should be with his family. Experts speculated that it had been the protein shakes that James had been preparing for Angela that had been poisoned, as it was the only thing in the home that wasn't consumed by the rest of the family. Her toxicology showed that she had likely been given small amounts at first, and when it wasn't working fast enough, she had been given larger and ultimately more lethal doses, showing that it wasn't an accident and had been calculated, thought-out plan James had designed to end his wife's life with intent and malice. News reports also show that Angela had 3 life insurance policies, with the beneficiaries being James Craig. In addition to gambling, James had lost a considerable amount of money from investing in cryptocurrency. His business partner described James as a significant risk-taker and took that approach to investing, but it had put him into $1 million of debt. James Craig has not made a plea at this time, and he has been assigned a public defender. Angela's family, including the children, have asked for privacy. James was initially held without bond because it was a capital offense, but a Colorado Supreme Court ruling in June said that judges must set a bond in first-degree murder cases. However, the bond was ultimately set at $10 million cash only. James does not seem to have paid that at this time. James Craig was set to put in a plea for the charges against him, but they have been delayed and at the time of recording have not recurred. James Craig has not been convicted of this crime, and the trial will likely go forward. On July 26, 2022, 41-year-old Aftab Hussein was discovered lying next to his vehicle on Rhode Island Street in Albuquerque, New Mexico, having sustained multiple gunshot wounds. He did not survive his injuries. Investigators found that his assailant had concealed themselves behind a bush near the driveway where Aftab typically parked, shooting him several times as he exited his vehicle. Aftab, a Muslim man originally from Pakistan, worked at the popular Flying Star Cafe in Albuquerque. Tragically, another Muslim man, Muhammad Afzal Hussein, was shot and killed just days later, on August 1st, in a drive-by shooting near the intersection of Cornell Drive and Garfield Avenue while he was out for an evening walk. Muhammad's brother had to identify his body and witness the horrific injuries inflicted by the shooting. Muhammad was also from Pakistan and had studied law and human resource management at the University of Punjab before moving to the United States with his brother on student visas to attend the University of New Mexico. There, he earned both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in community and regional planning. While pursuing his master's, he served as president of the Graduate and Professional Student Association, winning the position with 72% of the vote. According to his brother, Muhammad had the courage to speak out when others would not, which fueled his desire for a leadership role. He was in the process of obtaining U.S. citizenship and aspired to a career in politics. At the time of his death, He was a respected member of the planning team for the city of Espanola. He had a 90-minute commute each way to work every day because he chose to live in the same apartment complex as his brother in Albuquerque, so that he could be a major part of his brother's children's lives. Just before he was killed, he had been given the opportunity to live in a house on a 100-acre ranch owned by the city of Espanola, and he was looking forward to this new chapter in his life. The murders of two Muslim men in the same city in such a short amount of time raised concerns that the two crimes may have been connected and that Muslim men were being targeted by a killer. Authorities also considered the possibility that a third murder may also have been related. 62-year-old Muhammad Sahir Ahmadi was a Muslim man originally from Afghanistan. On November 7, 2021, he had been shot and killed behind the halal market he ran with his brother. Funeral services and a luncheon were held for Aftab and Muhammad at the Islamic Center of New Mexico on August 5, 2022. Several Albuquerque police cars were stationed nearby at the mosque's request, and the department announced it would be increasing its presence near all the mosques in the city for the time being in light of the murders. One of the more than 1,000 people in attendance at the services was 25-year-old Naeem Hussain. Naeem had come to the United States as a refugee from Pakistan in 2016, fleeing persecution he faced there as a Shia Muslim. He had been a United States citizen for less than a month. Upon his arrival in the United States, he worked as a truck driver, and once he obtained his U.S. citizenship, he began his own trucking company. He took great pride in his job and worked extra shifts when there were supply chain issues because he knew people were relying on goods being delivered. Even before he was officially a citizen, he loved the United States and its citizens and wanted to help them get critical supplies. He was a hard worker who supported himself as well as his family back in Pakistan. He was working to bring his wife to America and looking into purchasing property in Virginia. His brother-in-law described him as the most generous, kind, giving, patient, and down-to-earth person that I could ever meet. Following the funeral, Naeem made plans to meet up with some friends who also worked as truck drivers at his apartment, but he never showed up. His friends left his apartment to attend holiday services for Muharram at a Shiite mosque, but Naeem did not show up at the mosque either. He was not answering phone calls or texts, so his friends used an app they utilized to track each other's movements while they were driving their trucks to try to find him. The app showed that Naeem's vehicle was near the intersection of Truman Street and Grand Avenue. His friends arrived at that location around 11:20 p.m. They found Naeem's white 2020 Toyota 4Runner in the parking lot of Lutheran Family Services, where Naeem had previously worked with other refugees as caseworker, helping them resettle in the area. The vehicle's engine was running and its lights were on. When they got closer, his friends discovered Naeem's body slumped across the front seat, which was covered in his blood. By time, the Muslim community in Albuquerque was in a state of panic and feeling as though they were being targeted. Some people tried to leave the city and others would not leave their homes. When they did go out, many people chose to travel in groups. The Islamic Center of New Mexico issued a public warning for its members to be cautious, and the governor of New Mexico sent additional state police to Albuquerque after Naeem's murder. The Albuquerque police increased their presence at local mosques, the University of New Mexico, and Muslim-affiliated schools. The amount of fear the murders inspired in the community also inspired community action, which ultimately led to the arrest of a suspect. Hundreds of tips were called in to authorities, and residents who lived near the crime scenes voluntarily uploaded footage from their home surveillance cameras to a portal for law enforcement to examine. This effort resulted in police finding footage of one of the murders, with gunshots appearing on the video, which then showed a vehicle speeding away from the scene. Authorities released an image of a dark silver sedan, which they believed was most likely a Volkswagen Jetta, to the public. The car was described as a vehicle of interest in the 4 murders. The FBI and the Albuquerque police subsequently received numerous tips about a possible suspect who drove such a vehicle, 51-year-old Mohammed Syed. Syed was arrested by FBI agents and Albuquerque police detectives near Santa Rosa, New Mexico, more than 100 miles east of Albuquerque, on August 9, 2022. He was driving his Volkswagen Jetta at the time. He claimed he had been going to Texas to look for a new place for his family to live. He cited the unsafe conditions for Muslims in Albuquerque, illustrated by the 4 murders, as his motivation for wanting to move. At this time, he was charged with just 2 murders, the killings of Aftab Hussein and Muhammad Afzal Hussein. Prior to his arrest, investigators had learned that Syed and one of his sons had purchased multiple firearms and firearm accessories from several gun shops in Albuquerque, with the first purchase recorded in January of 2021. 2 of the firearms they purchased were of the same caliber as weapons used in the murders. While searching the Jeddah, police found numerous bullet casings. Testing revealed that 2 of them were a match to a casing found at the scene of Muhammad Afzal Hussein's murder. Syed's home was searched at the time of his arrest, and further evidence tying him to the murders was discovered. Numerous firearms were located and collected for testing. A rifle found underneath Syed's bed was found to be the weapon used to kill both Aftab Hussein and Muhammad Afzal Hussein. Syed and his family came to the United States from Afghanistan in 2016. He worked as a truck driver, although apparently not on a regular basis, and the family struggled financially. He was married and had 6 children. His wife and children were the alleged victims of numerous incidents of domestic violence that received police attention. Syed had been arrested on misdemeanor offenses related to these incidents, but the charges were always dropped. Syed's daughter, Luckna, was a frequent alleged victim of her father's violence over issues like her refusal to allow one of her brothers to chaperone her when she attended college classes and her relationship with the man who would become her husband. She told CNN that her father was initially angry over her 2018 marriage, but had come to be more accepting of it. Her husband was friends with both Aftab Hussein and Naeem Hussein. She did not believe that her father could be a murderer despite his history of violence. Authorities stated that they found evidence during the search of Syed's home that he knew the 4 victims in at least some capacity, and that they believed interpersonal conflict played a part in the motivation for the murders. Syed had a previous known conflict with the first suspected victim, Muhammad Amari. 2 years prior to his murder, Muhammad had confronted Syed over a suspected food stamp fraud scheme he was trying to carry out at the market Muhammad co-owned with his brother. Syed allegedly purchased large amounts of rice from the market using food stamps and then tried to return it for cash. According to his brother, Muhammad confronted Syed and then refused to let him into the market at all because he did not like dishonest people and would not participate in fraudulent activity. Syed returned to the market at least 3 times to threaten the family and would sit outside the building in his car after being forced to leave. In early 2020, Muhammad and his wife left Friday services at the Islamic Center of New Mexico to find that 2 of the tires on their car had been slashed. Security footage from the mosque showed someone slashing the tires, and the mosque reportedly identified Syed as the culprit. He was then banned from the center. On August 22, 2022, Syed was also charged with the murder of Naeem Hussein. This charge stemmed from the surveillance video of a car similar to Syed's fleeing the scene of the shooting. Ballistics testing also tied Syed to the crime. Syed has so far not been charged with the murder of Muhammad Amari, but investigators have stated that he is the prime suspect in that case. Syed's son, 21-year-old Shaheen Syed, has also faced legal troubles connected to his father's arrest. He was arrested the same day as his father, August 9th, and charged with providing false information when he purchased a firearm in 2021. While purchasing 2 military-style assault rifles at a firearms dealer in Albuquerque, Syed provided an address in Florida on the transaction record despite not living at the address. In November 2022, he agreed to a plea deal in which he pleaded guilty and was given a sentence equal to the amount of time he had spent in federal custody since his arrest. He was placed in a halfway house and also given 3 years of supervised release. The younger Syed has not been charged with any of the murders believed to have been committed by his father, although federal agents did testify at his initial detention hearing that there was evidence he helped his father coordinate the ambush-style murders. Shaheen accompanied his father to the gun store to pick up 2 AK-type weapons, one of which was later used in the of Aftab Hussein and Muhammad Afzal Hussein. He also went with him to a custom gunsmithing shop where an optical scope was attached to one of their rifles. This work was done on August 1, 2022, just 6 hours prior to the murder of Muhammad Afzal Hussein. Cell phone records also indicate that father and son were cooperating leading up to the murder of Naeem Hussein. The elder Syed followed Naeem from the Islamic Center of New Mexico, where he had attended services for 2 of the other murder victims to Lutheran Family Services. Shaheen's cell phone connected to his father's phone at 3:39 p.m. near the Islamic Center of New Mexico, 2 minutes before his father drove off, allegedly to follow Naeem. Father and son then had several brief phone conversations. Mohammed Syed has denied any involvement in the murders and remains in custody. 24-year-old Rebecca Cointoys was a mother to a daughter and, according to a family friend, had a heart for everything. Soft-spoken yet friendly, she was a member of the Crane River First Nation but grew up in Winnipeg. When she suddenly went missing, her community rallied together to help search for her. Unfortunately, when Rebecca was finally found, it was not a joyful reunion. On May 16, 2022, her remains were discovered in a garbage bin behind an apartment building in Winnipeg. The following month, additional remains were located in the Brady Road landfill south of the city. On May 18th, just 2 days after her initial discovery, police arrested 35-year-old Jeremy Anthony Michael Skibicki and charged him with first-degree murder in connection with Rebecca's death. Authorities indicated that he and Rebecca were acquainted, though the nature of their relationship was unclear. They also suggested the possibility that Skibicki may have had other victims. The full extent of the crimes attributed to him would remain unknown for several months. On December 1, 2022, the Winnipeg Police Service released a press release announcing that Skibicki was now being charged with 3 more counts of first-degree murder, bringing the total of such charges he now faces up to 4. The remains of the other 3 victims have not been located. Winnipeg Police Chief Danny Smythe has stated that their remains are most likely in the landfill where some of Rebecca's remains where police will not be able to search the site because of its massive size. Still, police say that they have enough evidence to recommend charges of first-degree murder for the killings. They also have stated that DNA played a role in this investigation, but have so far not elaborated on how it was used. Due to the ongoing proceedings, they are limited in what information can be released to the public. It is now believed that Rebecca Cointreau was Skibicki's final victim. The identity of the woman believed to have been Skibicki's first alleged victim has not been determined. Investigators believe she was most likely an Indigenous woman in her 20s and that she was killed around March 15, 2022. They have released an image of a reversible baby fat brand coat with fur trim, similar to one they believe she owned, and asked anyone who recognizes it and could identify its owner to contact them. The other 2 alleged victims have been identified as 39-year-old Morgan Beatrice Harris and 26-year-old Mercedes Myron. Both women were members of the Long Plain First Nation. It is believed that Morgan was killed on May 1, 2022, the last day she was seen alive. Morgan was a mother of 5 and a grandmother of 1. She had a strong spirit and was afraid of no one. I want her to be remembered as happy-go-lucky as she was. She was silly. She was fun. People loved to be around her, her daughter Cambria has said. Morgan was homeless at the time of her death, and according to Cambria, when they were out looking for her while she was missing, every person they talked to knew who Morgan was and no one had a bad thing to say about her. Cambria has been critical of the decision to not further search the landfill for remains, calling the choice disgusting. She believes her mother and the other victims deserve to be brought home. Mercedes is believed to have been killed on May 4th. She had been missing since March, last seen in Winnipeg's North End. She had been living on the streets at the time. Her grandmother, Donna Bartlett, had made appeals to the public trying to find her. A motive for the killings has not been determined, although Skibicki showed support for openly racist organizations and conspiracy theories on his social media accounts. All of his alleged victims were Indigenous women, although investigators have stated that they cannot be certain if this was intentional or coincidence at this time. Skibicki's ex-wife had been granted a 3-year order of protection against him in September of 2019. Skibicki has been in custody since his arrest for Rebecca's murder in May and remains at Milner Ridge Correctional Center. He appeared in court on December 2, 2022, where he was directly indicted on the 4 counts of first-degree murder, meaning the case will proceed directly to trial without a preliminary hearing. Skibicki's lawyer says that his client will be pleading not guilty to all of the charges against him. On September 24, 2021, The tantrums of 3-year-old Arley Do took a tragic turn when her family subjected her to an exorcism. Her cries echoed only within the walls of a small Pentecostal church, Iglesia Apostolici Prophetis, in San Jose, California. Arley took her last breath during a harrowing attempt to expel what they believed was a demon, led by her mother, Claudia Hernandez Santos, her uncle, Rene Aaron Hernandez Santos, and her grandfather, Rene Trigueros Hernandez. As prosecutors investigate this heartbreaking case, they reveal chilling details about a fatal church exorcism that has left the community reeling. With all 3 family members now accused, the legal proceedings seek to bring justice for little Arley. Investigators have spent months uncovering the roles of each family member, mother, uncle, and grandfather, who all played a part in the tragedy that claimed this innocent child's life. Arley was failed by the very family that should have safeguarded her. Did Arley Do receive the justice she deserves? San Jose, California, known for its museums, gardens, and historic architecture, stands as a vibrant heart of the state. As of the 2023 census, San Jose has a population of 930,862 people from diverse backgrounds. Over the past 5 years, the crime rate has surged significantly, and while it's considered one of the safest large cities in America, the crime rate per 100,000 people has exceeded the average of 316.3. However, this was an isolated incident. In the name of religion, a young soul had to depart so soon. Nestled within its quiet streets, the Iglesia Apostolici Prophetis, a seemingly ordinary and small Pentecostal church, became the epicenter of a chilling crime that unfolded in September 2021. Inside the confines of this unassuming church, a harrowing exorcism took place, forever staining its walls with the dark echoes of 3-year-old Arley Do's tragic demise. The Hernandez family members included 25-year-old Claudia Alicia Hernandez, the mother of the victim, 3-year-old Arley Do. Alongside Claudia, the family circle extends to Arley's uncle, Rene Hernandez Santos, and grandfather, Rene Hernandez Sr., both implicated in the horrifying exorcism that led to the child's untimely demise. Not much is known about the victim's uncle or father. The family's spiritual journey unfolded within the confines of Iglesia Apostolici Prophetis, a small Pentecostal church where Arley's grandfather, identified as the leader of the church and a certified pastor, played a prominent role. The family's occupations beyond their religious roles remain undisclosed. Claudia, the mother, handled a YouTube channel where she shared her live videos. But one fact that was certain was that they were extremely religious. It was their religious affiliations that led them to the tragic belief that the child was possessed that resulted in such an end. On September 24, 2021, a dark chapter unfolded in the life of this 3-year-old child as her family's misguided attempt to exorcise what they believed to be an evil spirit led to a day of unimaginable horror. The events that transpired on this fateful day would later become the focal point of legal proceedings and public scrutiny. It all started when Arley woke the night before and began screaming periodically. Arley's mother, Claudia Alicia Hernandez Santos, believed that the tantrum of her child was the work of evil forces and took her to the church to perform an exorcism. Claudia, in an attempt to perform an exorcism, put her finger down Arley's throat several times. Even though Arley was being subjected to so much pain, she fell asleep several times in between out of exhaustion. She was being held down by her uncle and grandfather. They held her by the neck, resulting in asphyxiation. According to Claudia, Arley's vomit was purple in color. The 2-hour-long ceremony ended in tragedy. However, the family didn't attempt to seek any medical help for almost 2 hours after she had passed away. After almost 2 hours, Claudia called the police shortly after 8 p.m. to report her daughter's lifeless state. Responding to the call, the authorities arrived at the Iglesia Apostolici Prophetis Church in San Jose, a place that would forever be etched in infamy. There, they discovered little Arley, unconscious on the floor, initiating a harrowing sequence of events that unfolded over the next few hours. Arley was subjected to relentless physical abuse, lost consciousness, and displayed signs of trauma with injuries around her eyes, face, neck, and chest. The family's disturbing belief in demonic possession led to a prolonged ordeal for the young girl, lasting approximately 12 hours. When paramedics finally arrived 2 hours later, they found her lifeless body on the church floor, marking the end of a day filled with torment and anguish. The affidavit, filed in Santa Clara County Superior Court, revealed that Arley's mother, Claudia, believed her daughter had died between 6 and 6:30 p.m. The family's distorted perception of spirituality and the misguided belief in their ability to expel evil through abusive practices cast a dark shadow over Arley's final moments. The investigation into the tragic death of Arley unfolded as a chilling tale of religious fervor gone awry, leading to a horrific exorcism performed by her own family members, her mother, uncle, and grandfather. The subsequent legal proceedings shed light on the shocking details of the whole 12-hour ordeal that culminated in Arley's death inside the confines of the small Pentecostal church, Iglesia Apostolici Prophetis, located in San Jose, California. The investigative process took a significant turn when Santa Clara County District Attorney Jeffrey Rosen filed court documents seeking to consolidate the cases of all 3 family members into a single trial. The rationale behind this request was rooted in the assertion that each defendant played a reprehensible role in the violence inflicted upon Arley, making it challenging to determine individual responsibility for specific injuries. The court documents revealed the disturbing timeline of events that unfolded on September 24, 2021. Arley's mother, 25-year-old Claudia Hernandez Santos, initiated the tragic sequence of events by calling the police to report her daughter's lifeless state. The authorities arrived at the Pentecostal church discovering Arley unconscious on the floor, a scene that would later be confirmed as the result of a homicide caused by suffocation and smothering. The investigation uncovered harrowing details of the family's collective actions during the 12-hour exorcism attempt. Prosecutors contended that all 3 defendants, Arley's mother, uncle, and grandfather, actively participated in physically abusing the young girl. At various points during the ordeal, each family member held Arley at different parts of her body, with one gripping her neck, another her abdomen, and the third holding her legs. The alleged attempt to induce vomiting involved a disturbing collaboration of efforts. A preliminary autopsy later confirmed that Arley's death was a result of homicide, with asphyxia due to suffocation identified as the cause. The alarming details emerged as investigators delved into the disturbing circumstances surrounding the little girl's demise. According to court documents, the family, gripped by the belief that Arley was possessed by a demon, engaged in a twisted form of prayer and exorcism at the church. Arley's mother, in an attempt to rid her daughter of the perceived evil spirit, resorted to distressing methods. She allegedly attempted to induce vomiting by sticking her fingers down Arley's throat and squeezing her neck, actions that escalated as the day went on. The investigation revealed a disturbing lack of care for Arley's basic needs leading up to her death. The affidavit stated that the victim last ate on Thursday, September 23rd, around 9 p.m., and was provided with only about 6 ounces of water from Thursday until the time of her death. The coroner's findings further emphasized the extent of Arley's suffering, revealing injuries to her face and neck, as well as blunt force injuries across her chest and back. Internal bleeding added another layer of brutality to the acts committed by her own family members. As the investigation unfolded, the family members faced charges of child abuse, including assault on a child with force likely to cause great bodily injury resulting in death. The legal proceedings brought attention to the distorted beliefs that fueled the family's actions, the misguided conviction that Arley was possessed by a demon, and that a religious ritual could expel this perceived evil. The court documents delved into individual statements made by each defendant during police interviews. Arley's grandfather, the self-proclaimed pastor of Iglesia Apostolici Prophetis, provided varying accounts of the events leading to the young girl's death. His changing narratives between September may raise suspicions about the accuracy of his statements and hinted at potential inconsistencies or attempts to obfuscate the truth. Similarly, Arley's uncle, Rene Aaron Hernandez Santos, significantly altered his initial account during subsequent interviews with the police. The evolving nature of his statement suggested a lack of transparency and prompted further scrutiny of the circumstances surrounding the exorcism. If convicted, Claudia Alicia Hernandez faces an exceptionally severe sentence of 25 years to life in prison. The investigation unfolded against the backdrop of a disturbing trend: increased demand for exorcisms driven by a confluence of factors such as poverty, anxiety, and a lack of trust in conventional institutions. The tragic case of Arley Do served as a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in the intersection of religious fervor and unchecked beliefs. As the legal proceedings progressed, the call for a consolidated trial underscored the complexity of assigning individual culpability for a crime committed collaboratively. The family's statements and actions, as revealed through the investigation, provide a chilling insight into their perspective on the events surrounding the young girl's death. The family's narrative begins with Arley's mother, Claudia Hernandez Santos, expressing her belief that her daughter was possessed by an evil spirit. According to statements provided to police, Arley would periodically wake up at night crying or screaming, which fueled the family's conviction that she was under the influence of a demonic force. In response to these perceived manifestations, Claudia attempted to perform what she described as an exorcism to rid Arley of the alleged evil spirit. Claudia's involvement in the exorcism took a disturbing turn as she detailed the methods she employed in a rather matter-of-fact manner. First responders who arrived at the scene observed bruising around the child's eyes, neck, and chest. Claudia admitted that they waited for 2 hours before finally calling 911. Subsequent interviews with investigators revealed Claudia's evolving beliefs about Arley's possession. Claudia and her uncle reportedly prayed for Arley while inside a bedroom. The events escalated the following morning when Claudia and her uncle drove Arley to the Iglesia Apostolici Prophetas, a small Pentecostal church. The family still held the belief that Arley was under demonic control. The family believed she had died between 6 and 6:30 p.m., around 12 hours after arriving at the church. According to Arley's father, they had to perform the ceremony to liberate her of her evil spirits. The details about the exorcism weren't revealed, however. It was stated that Arley was asleep when they reached the church. He also added, "If you read the Bible, you'll see that Jesus cast away demons and made sick people healthy again," he told the newspaper. "It's not when I want to do it. It's when God, in His will, wants to heal the person. The preacher is like an instrument of God. What we do is what God says." In the aftermath of Arley's death, Claudia set up a GoFundMe campaign to solicit donations for burial expenses. The family's deep-rooted religious convictions were evident in Claudia's Instagram profile description, which included a reference to Isaiah chapter 55 verse 8 through 11, a Bible verse about finding strength during difficult times. Arley's mother added another layer to the investigation through YouTube videos she uploaded, providing insights into her perspective on her daughter's death. In these videos, Claudia did not accept blame for the alleged exorcism or her daughter's demise. Instead, she attributed Arley's death to a divine act, asserting that God took her and expressing gratitude that her daughter would not have to face the hardships of the world. In a bizarre turn of events, a YouTube video surfaced in January, for months after Arley's passing, featuring Claudia Hernandez discussing her daughter's death. The 40-minute self-shot video titled with Arley's full name offers a haunting glimpse into Hernandez's demeanor as she addresses the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. Hernandez's statements in the video attempt to provide her perspective on the situation, asserting that only those present truly understand what transpired. She acknowledges the negative perception surrounding her and the circumstances of her daughter's death, but emphasizes her inability to change the past. Hernandez expresses gratitude that her daughter is no longer suffering in a world she perceives as increasingly challenging and deteriorating. As a matter of fact, the video becomes a poignant exploration of Hernandez's emotions, revealing the pain of losing a child juxtaposed with moments of apparent attachment. She reflects on the joy of being a mother, acknowledging the sadness, tears, and longing for her daughter. The complex emotional landscape painted in the video adds another layer of intricacy to an already deeply tragic narrative. 6 days after the YouTube video was uploaded, prosecutors formally charged Hernandez. The gravity of these charges, coupled with the perceived disconnect between Hernandez's demeanor in the video and the alleged actions leading to Arley's death, underscores the complexity of the case. The family's association with Iglesia Apostolici Prophetas took a darker turn as the church was linked to another incident, an alleged kidnapping involving individuals associated with the church. Professor Allison Cavey, an expert in the history of magic, science, and religion, provided valuable insights into the broader context of exorcisms. She highlighted the increasing prevalence of exorcisms in both the United States and Latin America over the last 5 to 7 years. KV pointed out challenges stemming from the Catholic Church's lack of preparation for priests to perform exorcisms, leading to a demand that is not met by qualified individuals. She also identified societal factors such as poverty, anxiety, and a lack of trust in conventional institutions for education as driving forces behind the demand for exorcisms. KV emphasized that when people choose supernatural explanations, like demonic possession, it often stems from dissatisfaction with natural explanations, providing comfort without the burden of blame or responsibility. In the case of Arley's family, the tragic events unfolded against the backdrop of a desperate attempt to solve a problem they may not have fully understood, attributing it to supernatural forces. It's alarming how the family didn't express any form of guilt or sorrow even after Arley's loss. The YouTube video recorded by Claudia before her arrest offered a glimpse into her emotional journey from the excitement of pregnancy to the profound grief of losing her daughter. Her sentiments reflected the difficulty of accepting a child's loss due to illness, pushing individuals to seek solace in supernatural explanations. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Claudia Alicia Hernandez Santos faced charges of felony, assault on a child with force likely to produce great bodily injury resulting in death. Her arrest, which occurred on January 31, 2022, highlighted the severity of the crimes committed during that fateful exorcism. The day of horror marked by religious fervor gone awry not only claimed the life of a young child, but also brought to light the dangerous intersection of misguided beliefs and heinous actions. The tragic case of Arley Do came to an end when her mother, Claudia Alicia Hernandez, was charged with felony assault on a child with force likely to produce great bodily injury. The severity of the allegations prompted prosecutors to emphasize the extreme nature of the actions she's accused of committing against her own daughter. The decision to deny bail was motivated by concerns over public safety and the assessment that Hernandez presented a high flight risk. Prosecutors pointed out her minimal ties to the community, coupled with her birthplace in El Salvador, as factors contributing to the perceived risk. This precautionary measure underscores the severity of the accusations against Hernandez and the potential dangers she may pose if released pending trial. The disturbing details of the case were brought to public attention through newly uncovered court documents, as neither the San Jose Police Department nor the District Attorney's Office had initially disclosed information about the harrowing homicide. The investigative process aimed to unravel the circumstances surrounding Arley's death, with Hernandez emerging as the sole individual arrested in connection to the case. The legal proceedings will continue to unfold, scrutinizing the evidence, witness testimonies, and the chilling details revealed in the court documents. Anyways, as the justice system navigates the intricacies of this case, the focus will remain on seeking accountability for the actions that led to the tragic loss of Arley's life. The proceedings will unfold with a commitment to ensuring justice for the young victim and holding those responsible accountable for the alleged heinous acts that cut short a promising and innocent life. 16-year-old Billy Carroll was a well-known figure in his Chicago neighborhood, primarily due to his friendly and humorous nature. However, Billy harbored secrets. He spent little time at home and even less at school, often roaming the streets. Even his friends were unaware of how he filled most of his days. Despite coming from a financially struggling family, he always seemed to have money, which was uncommon in the uptown area. When he had cash, he loved to splurge on food and own nicer items, like skates, that most kids in the neighborhood couldn't afford. Whenever he came into extra money, he would also buy food and clothes for his friends. Billy was resourceful and determined to make money, which sometimes led him to obtain it through questionable means. He was the middle child of 3, and his parents faced challenges in supporting the family, particularly with Billy's younger sister, Caroline, who had been born with severe disabilities. Eventually, the family had to make the tough decision to place her in a residential facility, where she lived until her passing in 2012. Both of Billy's parents struggled with alcohol and were abusive, leading Billy to confront his father on multiple occasions, sometimes in self-defense and other times to protect his mother. After watching the 1972 Olympics on television, Billy became motivated to work out. He joined the local YMCA to swim, box, and lift weights. Samuel Stapleton was born in Chicago but grew up in a humble home with no running water in the woods near the Ohio-Kentucky border. While his family did not have much money, Sam thrived as he ran wild through the woods, getting dirty and scraped up as he climbed trees and jumped into creeks. Sam's family eventually moved to Chicago for more economic opportunities, living in multiple neighborhoods over time. When his family moved to the Chicago neighborhood of Uptown, he made a point of identifying the toughest kid in the neighborhood before his family's belongings were even brought into their apartment so as to immediately secure a tough reputation with the other kids. He knew how to defend himself physically and how to respond when someone was taking advantage of him, something he appears to have inherited from his mother, Bessie. He was streetwise and knew how to navigate around the various gangs that operated in his neighborhood. In May of 1976, Sam was preparing to enter high school. He looked forward to joining ROTC at Senn High School. He had his first job as a delivery boy for a local pizza shop and hoped to soon have even better employment. A contractor calling himself John would call the Stapleton home asking for Sam, with the promise of a job with his company. The boy Sam beat up upon his arrival to Uptown was Randy Raffett, who did not harbor a grudge over the fight. The two boys were not close friends but managed to coexist as two of the toughest kids in their neighborhood. Randy was one of 4 children, and his family originally hailed from Kentucky. His father was abusive towards his mother, and the children sometimes tried to protect her from him. They all, including Randy, would sometimes run away for brief periods when their home life became too difficult to deal with, but they always came home after a short time. He was just 15 years old when he disappeared on May 14, 1976. Dale Landigan moved around extensively as a child, which was reflected in his name. His name was really Frank, but his father nicknamed him Del because he had been born in Delaware, which eventually evolved into Dale. He and his 4 sisters all adored their mother. After years of living in Brooklyn, the family moved to Chicago's Uptown neighborhood in 1969 to escape growing crime in New York and join Dale's great-uncle Pablo, who owned an apartment building where he offered Dale's family a unit. Dale liked to play pranks, although he could sometimes take them too far, once convincing his family that he had been hit by a car and killed at a gas station. He could come off as aggressive and pushy, but could ultimately win over friends. In February of 1978, 19-year-old Billy Kindred was in love with his girlfriend Mary Jo. The young couple planned to marry once Billy found a good job. One night, however, Billy failed to show up for their nightly meeting, and all his belongings were found left in his bedroom. Mary Jo reported him missing and spent months driving around Chicago looking for him after she got off of work. When Mary Jo first met Billy, she took note of how physically attractive she found him, but she had truly been drawn in by his kind smile. He respected her and he respected his elders, which won him the approval of sometimes people would try to fight him, but he had little patience for such things. He was instead kind-hearted with a carefree nature. He lived with his parents and sister and was the grandson of Polish immigrants. He had left a job with a lumber company because he had been paid so well by John Wayne Gacy for contracting work. John Sytch was the middle child of 5. He loved animals from a young age and kept pets ranging from bullfrogs to albino hamsters. He regularly brought home stray dogs and cats from the neighborhood to care for as well. As a child, he was an altar server at Chicago's oldest Polish church and attended the parish school. His family moved to the suburb of Des Plaines just before he began his junior year of high school, and he quickly made friends with the members of the school's drama department, hanging out with them in the woods after school. He also got a job at a local pet store. One of his high school friends described him as a sweetheart and claimed to have never seen John without a smile. He remained close with his friends in Chicago even after he moved and returned there for parties and nights out, although he was not a big drinker. 20-year-old David Talsma volunteered for the Marines in 1977. He was on inactive duty when he had plans to attend a concert in Hammond, Indiana on the evening of December 9, 1977. He had made arrangements to meet up with a young woman there around 2 a.m., but he never showed up. He instead vanished. 15-year-old Rob Piest kept a busy schedule. Community service project, shy of reaching his goal of becoming an Eagle Scout. Extracurricular activities like working tech on his school play or gymnastics kept him at school until 5:30 p.m., and on most days his mother would pick him up from school with a hot meal that he would eat on his way to work his 6 to 9 p.m. shift at Neeson's pharmacy. His co-workers there would later describe him as a wholesome kid who they could not envision ever smoking or using swear words. He was kind and polite, sometimes loaning his coat to the girl working the front register who was subjected to cold air when the door to the store was opened. He was supposed to go home after his shift on December 11, 1978 to eat cake to celebrate his mother's 46th birthday, but he instead left with John Wayne Gacy to discuss a summer job with his construction company. Rob had just been denied a raise at the pharmacy, and Gacy's rate of $5 an hour was nearly double what he was making there. He was saving up to buy a Jeep with $900 already put aside for the eventual purchase, once he could drive. John Prestige grew up in Michigan, mainly in the Kalamazoo area. His father lived in a trailer there, and his mother and stepfather owned a beehive farm in a nearby town. He began taking healthcare classes part-time at Kalamazoo Valley Community College after graduating high school, paying for them by working at a local motel. He did not get along with management there and traveled whenever he could to get away from the stresses of his everyday life. He had gone to New Orleans for Mardi Gras in February of 1977, and the following month he was in Chicago visiting a friend as he made his way out to Colorado to go skiing. 17-year-old Michael Bonin lived near Wrigley Field with his father, stepmother, and younger sister before going missing on June 3, 1976. His fishing license was later found inside Gacy's home. He was athletic, a talented wrestler and baseball player. At the time of his disappearance, he had been working at a gas station. Russell Nelson was an architecture student at the University of Minnesota who came to Chicago in the fall of 1977 towards the beginning of a long road trip that would take him as far north as Toronto and as far south as Florida. He was a talented dancer who had won competitions back in Minnesota. He was last heard from on October 17, 1977, when he called his mother to wish her a happy birthday. According to his mother, he and a friend had been doing work for a contractor while in Chicago. Russell also left behind a fiancée. As the son of a police sergeant, 18-year-old Robert Gilroy received one of the most extensive investigations into his disappearance when he first went missing. His father conducted his own investigation, and his file with the Chicago police consists of more than 40 pages. Robert disappeared on September 15, 1977, after telling his parents he was going to his horseback riding lesson in Northbrook, although he had in fact stopped attending the lessons weeks earlier. He was not reported missing until nearly 2 weeks later because he was supposed to be at a camp in Gaithersburg, Maryland. He never made it to the camp. Rick Johnston lived in the suburb of Bensonville but was last seen in Chicago when his mother dropped him off in front of the Aragon Ballroom in the Uptown neighborhood. Multiple bands were playing the venue that night, but Rick told his mother he would call her for a ride home after the band Spirit played their set. He never made that call. His family feared he had been recruited by a cult because of his recent interest in religion and studying the Bible. They traveled as far as Washington, D.C. to look for Rick amongst the congregants of Reverend Moon's Unification Church at one of their rallies. 19-year-old Daryl Sampson was a native of West Virginia who was living in Chicago's Uptown neighborhood when he went missing in April of 1976. He had previously run away as a juvenile in 1973 in an effort to get out of a court appearance related to curfew violations. Within a few days, he was at his father's house in Virginia. After he disappeared in 1976, he would not be seen again until his remains were found under Gacy's dining room floor at the end of 1978. The family of Matthew Bowman of Crystal Lake, Illinois had already lost one of its members to homicide. Matthew's stepfather, Anthony Rovatuso, was shot and killed during a carjacking in 1975. Matthew's mother last saw him on July 5, 1977, when she dropped him off at a rail station so he could get to a court appearance over a parking ticket. He called her a few hours later to let her know he would be going to Chicago to visit his sister at her apartment. He left his sister's apartment around 6 or 7 o'clock that night after telling her he was going home. He never arrived. John Mowry had also been impacted by homicide before he himself was murdered. In November of 1972, when he was just 14 years old, he had been sent to his sister Judy's apartment to check on her, only to find her stabbed to death on the floor. John joined the Marines after graduating high school, returning to Chicago after completing his service. He worked at a bank and began taking accounting classes at Truman College in Uptown. The last time his mother saw him was at her home, where he came for dinner in an effort to cheer himself up after one of his dogs was struck and killed by a car. 20-year-old Tommy Bowling was the married father of a 3-year-old boy named Timmy. Before disappearing on November 18, 1977, he called his parents' home to check in on his father, who had not been feeling well. Around this time, he had been receiving threatening phone calls, which he took seriously enough to instruct his mother to contact the police should she not hear from him for 24 hours. 16-year-old Robert Winch was one of 6 children from Michigan. His father taught physics at Kalamazoo College. Robert had difficulties at home, which led to him staying in a foster home during weekdays. He ran away from that foster home in November of 1977. Timothy O'Rourke was 20 years old when he vanished on June 30, 1978. He had a distinctive tattoo that read Tim Lee on his left arm, a tribute to his love for martial artist Bruce Lee. He frequented gay bars and was close friends with a transgender woman, which Gacy's defense team later tried to use to undermine the witnesses who spoke on his behalf at Gacy's trial. 20-year-old James Matsara of Elmwood Park was last seen by his family the day after Thanksgiving of 1978. He had the nickname of Mojo. 16-year-old Kenneth Parker's family lived in the Edgewater neighborhood after moving to Chicago from Tennessee. He was going through a difficult time and was on parole. He spent a lot of time hanging out at the Yankee Doodle Dandy, a restaurant in Midtown, with his longtime friend Michael Marino. Michael Marino was just 14 years old. He and Kenneth Parker were last seen alive on October 24, 1976 at the Yankee Doodle Dandy. The remains were later found in a shared grave beneath Gacy's house. His mother had reported him missing after he failed to arrive to see a movie with her as planned on the evening of October 24th. John Butkovich was later described as a nice kid who lived with his family on the north side of Chicago. He was close with his parents and sisters and had plenty of friends. He would always call home if he would be returning late. He had dropped out of high school to work in construction and worked for Gacy on and off for over a year. When he disappeared in July of 1975, he reportedly was trying to get Gacy to pay him back wages he still owed him. John's family always suspected that Gacy was involved in his disappearance and called police every week for more than 2 years, trying to get them to investigate his case seriously. Authorities insisted that John had simply run away. Circumstances did not support this theory. John had been working to renovate his first apartment and had just spent $2,000 on carpeting before he disappeared. He also left behind a large amount of money in his bank account. Also discrediting the runaway theory was the fact that his car was left behind in a location Gacy would later admit to moving it to. The keys were left in the ignition, and John's wallet, keys, and ID were on the front seat. These 24 of Gacy's victims were identified by March of 1980. In June of 1981, the 9 victims who had still not been identified were laid to rest in donated caskets. A short service for all 9 victims was held outside Abbey Chapel of the Oak Ridge Glen Oaks Cemetery, and each victim also received his own graveside service when he was buried under a grave marker reading, "We remembered." Each victim was buried in a different cemetery. In May of 1986, one of these victims was identified as 16-year-old Timothy Jack McCoy, leaving authorities with 8 individuals to identify. Tim had small-town origins but an extensive travel history, living in and visiting numerous states across the country during his short life. This was the result of both his father's restlessness, which brought the family to places like California and Florida, and his own. He was mischievous and daring from a young age and was never afraid to throw himself into a lake or even a moving boxcar without hesitation. At 15, he left school and obtained a fake ID so that he could work as a forklift operator. Tim's life was largely formed by his large extended family. It made up a large part of the population of his hometown of Bartlett, Iowa, and he traveled regularly to spend time with the members of the family who had moved throughout the Midwest. He spent New Year's of 1972 visiting one of his cousins in Michigan. He left Michigan by bus to return to Omaha, where his father was living, on January 2nd. He had an overnight stop in Chicago, during which he met Gacy at the Greyhound station. In October of 2011, Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart announced a renewed effort to identify the remaining 8 victims. They were all exhumed so that samples could be taken for DNA testing, and Sheriff Dart made an appeal to the public, asking for friends and relatives of young men or teenage boys who went missing any time between 1970 December 22, 1978 to contact his office. The appeal quickly yielded results. The boy previously only identified as Gacy victim number 19 was identified as 19-year-old William George Bundy on November 29, 2011. Bill's mother had feared he had been one of Gacy's victims and tried to get his dental records to submit to police, as they had requested back in 1979. However, his dentist had retired, and by the time she was able to track him down, he had destroyed all of his records. Bill was identified after his brother and sister provided DNA samples. Bill had been popular at Senn High School and had plenty of friends. According to his sister Laura, all of her friends wanted to date him and only came to see her at her house for the opportunity to see her brother. He was a talented diver and gymnast. However, Bill ultimately chose to drop out of high school to begin doing electrical work. Bill went missing in October of 1976. One evening, he told his family he was headed out to a party as he was leaving the house. He forgot to take his wallet with him. He never came home. In July of 2017, victim number 24 was identified as 16-year-old Jimmy Hackinson. His mother had gone to Chicago from her home in Minnesota in 1979 to try to learn if her son was amongst Gacy's victims, but she did not have dental records to submit to the police to identify him. He was also identified thanks to DNA submitted by his brother and sister. Jimmy was one of 4 children and lived in St. Paul, Minnesota. He was funny and good-natured despite difficult circumstances at home. His father drank heavily and was largely absent, and his mother often had to work as many as 3 jobs at a time to support the family. One day in the summer of 1976, he announced to his family that he was going to Chicago. Hitchhiking was not unusual at the time, and Jimmy had left home in the past to get away from stressors at home. He had always safely returned, so this trip did not raise any concerns. He called his mother on August 5th to let her know that he had safely made it to Chicago. However, weeks then passed with no calls from Jimmy, and he did not return home, so he was reported missing at the beginning of September. The number of unidentified Gacy victims then dropped to 5 on October 25, 2021, when the man previously only known as Gacy victim number 5 was publicly identified as Francis Wayne Alexander. In addition to his extended family, Wayne is survived by his mother, 2 half-sisters, and 2 half-brothers. DNA extracted from one of victim number 5's molars had undergone 8 months of specialized testing and processing to prepare a profile suitable to be used with genetic genealogy. The Cook County Sheriff's Office partnered with the DNA Doe Project for the genealogical research. Genealogists identified Wayne as a potential match and submitted his name to the sheriff's office. Investigators there used more traditional means of investigation to follow up on the lead. When they could not find any evidence of Wayne being alive after the time period when they believed victim number 5 was killed, which would have disproven the identification, they traveled to North Carolina to meet with his family. They collected DNA samples from Wayne's mother and brother, which confirmed that Wayne was Gacy victim number 5. Wayne was born in 1955. He grew up in North Carolina and lived in New York for a time. He got married while he was living there. He and his wife moved to Chicago in February of 1975, but the couple soon divorced after 3 months of marriage. His family never filed a missing persons report because, based on certain decisions that he had made, they believed he wanted to be left alone. While they loved him, they thought he no longer wanted anything to do with them when he stopped contacting them. Wayne supported himself by working at various bars and clubs in Chicago. Authorities do not know exactly how he and Gacy crossed paths, but Wayne lived and worked in an area where Gacy was known to look for victims. He lived near several other victims of Gacy, including William Bundy, who lived just blocks away from Wayne. Wayne would have been 21 or 22 years old when he was killed. The last official record of him was a traffic ticket issued to him on January 5, 1976. He was buried at Gacy's property under an individual whose death authorities have placed on March 15, 1977, indicating that Wayne was killed sometime during the window of time between receiving the traffic ticket and the death of the other victim. Financial records show that Wayne earned very little income in 1976, potentially indicating that he was killed earlier on in that window. When investigators returned to the Alexander family to confirm that Wayne was in fact Gacy victim number 5 on October 22, 2021, there were 5 generations of the family in the room to hear the news. Wayne's mother was the first parent to still be alive to be notified that their son had been identified as one of Gacy's victims since the renewed effort began in 2011. The family greatly appreciated the kindness the people of Cook County had showed Wayne, giving him a proper funeral and burial even though they had not known his identity when they did so. As of November of 2022, 5 of Gacy's victims remain unidentified, but investigators still hope to one day identify all of them. Victim 10 is believed to have been between 17-21 years old and between 5 feet 7 5 feet 11 inches tall. He had a well-healed fracture to his left clavicle. His time of death has been estimated to have been between March 15 to July 5, 1977. Victim 13 is estimated to have been between 5'11" 6 feet 2 inches tall and between 17-22 years old. His hair was a dark enough brown that it would appear black. He was probably suffering from a severe toothache at the time of his death, which has been estimated to have been between August-October 1976. Victim 21's remains were completely skeletonized by the time they were discovered, complicating the process of determining exact details about him. He was most likely between the ages of 15-27 and between 5'8" and 6 feet tall. Based on the location where his remains were found relative to other victims with known dates of death, it is believed he was killed sometime between June 13 and October 25, 1976. Victim 26 is estimated to have been between 5 feet 2 5 feet 6 inches tall and between 20-30 years of age. He was most likely murdered sometime between June 13 and August 6, 1976. Victim 28 was killed sometime between early 1972 and the end of July of 1975. He was between 5'8" 5 feet 9 inches tall and 14 and 18 years old. He was found wearing a white metal band on his left ring finger. He had brown hair and may have previously broken his right upper arm. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.